My first car was a 1960 Rover P4. It was huge, like a tank. It kind of looks like a Rolls Royce. All leather interior, had carpets, it smelled like a kind of front room, and bench seats. I got paid for my first acting job, and I took out £1,200. And I saw an advert in the newspaper, and we went up to Barnsley in Yorkshire, and I paid cash to a guy in a pub with me and my mate. I didn't have a license at the time. For the record, my mate was driving the car, he had a license. But I remember when we went up to Yorkshire, there's a very specific regional dialect that people in that part of the country have, and it's quite Shakespearean. And I remember being in the pub, and I had £1,200 in cash, which, you know, I was pretty scared. Being a young man, I don't think I'd ever carried that much money about my person. And right before I handed over the money, there was actually a kind of fight in the pub. And the landlord was telling off this young boy, who was clearly a bit of a local troublemaker. And he was telling him off for going into his house and spilling milk. And I'll never forget it, because he turned to him and he said, "I tell thee, it's not thine house, it's mine. It's not thine, it's mine." And sometimes when you read Shakespearean dialogue on the page, you think, oh, how do I get myself into the headspace where I can speak like that? But weirdly, on that day, in that pub, people were speaking in a way that was almost identical to the way that Shakespeare spoke. I don't still have the car, but amazing story. Almost 20 years later, my dad had moved outside of London. A guy in the next door village suddenly turned up in the village with a Rover P4. The guy looked in the logbook and he saw my name, and he contacted my dad and said, "I think, you know, someone in your family used to own this car." So I went to visit my dad, and I got to have a reunion, and we went for a little drive.